On Thanksgiving Day, yes, that annual excuse to eat yourself into a food coma while pretending you actually like your relatives. I rocked up at my daughter's house unannounced. Call it instinct. Or stupidity. Probably both. And what do I find? My grandson. Sat outside. In 15-degree weather. No coat. No hat. Just a t-shirt and shorts like he's auditioning for some twisted polar survival reality show. Meanwhile inside, oh, the picture of cozy domestic bliss. The whole family, warm as toast, guzzling turkey, and cackling like they were in a sitcom nobody asked to watch. Now, I'm not a man prone to theatrics, but let's just say when I saw him shivering out there like a forgotten ice lolly, something in me snapped. I kicked the bloody door down and spat out 6 words that drained the color from their smug little faces. And honestly, that was only the opening act. Before I serve the main course of chaos, though, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are. Because clearly, time zones are more reliable than families. Anyway, let's rewind a bit, shall we? My phone had buzzed earlier, right there on the dashboard of my old Chevrolet. A text from a neighbor. Saw police cars at the Hendersons again. Domestic situation. Made me think of you. Charming, isn't it? Nothing says, you remind me of a mess, quite like being compared to your neighbor's soap opera marriage. But the Hendersons did have a knack for public drama. Martha used to worry about their grandson, bless her. Back when she was alive. Back when she had the energy to worry about anything at all. Now it's just me. Me and that gut-rotting feeling every time I think about Leona's marriage. Lovely thing, worry. Really fills the hours since Martha's been gone. The clock read 2:30. Time to go. I shifted into reverse, snow pelting down thick as regret, and rolled onto Miller Street. Radio? Blasting Led Zeppelin. Because of course. Nothing like classic rock to soundtrack your spiraling family crisis. On the passenger seat sat 2 gift bags. One with a shiny new baseball glove for Amos, genuine leather. Cost me more than my sense of dignity. The other? Comic books. He's 18, so probably too old for them. But let's be honest. You're never too old for heroes. Unless you marry into my family. In which case even Superman couldn't save you. Family is all we have left, Martha always said. I used to grumble, but she was right. And now, she's still right. Bloody infuriating when dead people get to win arguments. Snow thickened, wipers flapped uselessly, and cars crawled past with hazard lights blinking like drunk fireflies. I kept it steady at 40. No point dying in a ditch before I got the chance to ruin everyone's holiday. Tried ringing Leona's house. 6 rings. Voicemail. Of course. Because why answer your phone when your father is driving through a blizzard with presents and unresolved trauma? Pulled into a gas station. Needed coffee. And peppermints. Amos loved them. The clerk looked half asleep, told me roads were bad. 3 accidents already. Lovely pep talk. Exactly what you want to hear while you're white-knuckling the steering wheel. Back in the truck. 3:05 p.m. The trip usually takes 45 minutes. Today? More like an hour. Perfect. Just enough time to rehearse family small talk I didn't actually want to have. I thought about Amos. Maybe helping his mom in the kitchen. Maybe pretending to enjoy football with Wilbur. Last summer we'd gone fishing at Lake Erie. He caught his first base, grinned like he'd won $1 million. That's also when I saw the bruise. Said he'd fallen off his bike. Classic excuse. Shame, it looked less like handlebars and more like fingerprints. I should have pressed harder. Should have asked questions. Martha would have. But me? I just let it go. Because apparently, I excel at ignoring the obvious until it slaps me in the face at Thanksgiving. Took exit 15 into Leona's neighborhood. Suburban perfection. 2-story houses, wreaths, pumpkins, the full Pinterest catalog. Some had already gone full Christmas lights. Because nothing says holiday cheer like maxing out your electricity bill. Finally, Leona's house. Blue 2-story, white shutters, Wilbur's pickup smugly sat in the driveway. Chimney puffing smoke like a Hallmark card. It looked normal. Peaceful even. Which should have been my first red flag. I slowed down, imagining the surprise on their faces when I knocked. Maybe Amos would hug me like he used to. Maybe this Thanksgiving would finally stitch our family back together. Because apparently, I'm still naive enough to hope. Pulled into the drive. Holiday lights twinkled. Music spilled out. Norman Rockwell could have painted it. And then him, Amos, sitting on the front steps. No coat, no hat, just jeans and a thin shirt already dusted with snow. Shoulders hunched, arms wrapped round himself like the world's saddest snowman. Jesus Christ, I muttered, flinging open the truck door. Wind slapped me hard enough to sting. And there he was. Lips blue, skin pale, trembling like he'd been exiled from warmth itself. Amos, I shouted, boots skidding across the icy drive. What the hell are you doing out here? He looked up, relief in his eyes so sharp it nearly broke me. Grandpa. His teeth chattered so hard the word barely made it out. I can't. Didn't wait for him to finish. Yanked off my coat and wrapped him in it. He was freezing. Proper shaking, like a leaf in a hurricane. What do you mean you can't? Can't what? I pulled him to his feet, steadying him as his legs gave out. I'm not allowed. He clutched the coat tighter, shivering like a broken radiator. Not allowed to what? His reply landed like a punch to the ribs. I'm not allowed to go in the house. Behind us, through the warm, glowing windows, came laughter. Clinking glasses. Football on the telly. Inside, joy. Outside, my grandson, left to freeze like rubbish waiting for collection. And in that moment, I stopped caring about surprises or civility or even the bloody turkey. Because if you think I was about to let that slide, you don't know me very well. My voice came out sharper than I meant it, but honestly, what do you expect when your grandson looks like an abandoned snowman on your daughter's doorstep? This is your home, I snapped. He flinched. Brilliant. Exactly what he needed. Yet another adult barking orders. Nice one, Grandpa. 10 out of 10 parenting. Please don't make it worse for me, he whispered, eyes darting to the front door like a rabbit spotting a fox. Please, Grandpa. If Wilbur hears you. Ah, Wilbur. My daughter's prize catch. The man of the house. The sort of bloke who thinks discipline means creative new ways to ruin a teenager's will to live. I looked at the house. Really looked. The twinkling decorations, the warm golden lights, the sound of laughter drifting through. A postcard of family joy. Then back at Amos, blue-lipped, dressed like he'd been mugged by summer and left for dead in winter. How long? I asked softer now. Gentle but firm. How long have you been out here? His eyes dropped to the snow. Since this morning. I checked my watch. 3:15. He'd been out there for 4.5 hours. 4.5 hours. In below freezing temperatures. For reference, that's the sort of weather that can kill a person. But sure, let's call it character building. I tried the front door. Locked, of course. Nothing screams happy holiday, like barring your own kid from entering. Right, I muttered. We're getting you warm. Got him into my truck, cranked the heater to hellfire, and pulled out an emergency blanket. His hands were so numb he couldn't even grip it properly, so I rubbed them between mine. My rage was practically boiling the snow outside. Talk to me, son, I said, forcing my voice steady. What happened this morning? He stared at his shaking hands. I was helping Mum with the turkey, forgot to turn off the oven timer when I basted it. That's it. The turkey got a little burned on top. He finally glanced up at me. His eyes were full of fear, like he'd set fire to the crown jewels, not singed a bit of poultry. And then, the punchline. Wilbur walked in, saw the turkey, and decided to reenact the apocalypse. Yelled that Amos had ruined Thanksgiving. Said the guests would think Mum couldn't cook. Yes, clearly, Gordon Ramsay himself was about to pop round and do a turkey inspection. So Wilbur's grand solution? Banishing a boy to the frozen outdoors until he'd learned responsibility. And my daughter? My flesh and blood? She tried to step in, apparently, until Wilbur told her to stay out of it, which she promptly did. Because nothing says motherly instinct quite like, you're right, darling, let the child turn into an icicle. Pass the gravy. I checked the clock again. 2:30. He'd been out since 11. Over 4 hours for slightly crispy turkey skin. Turkey that, let's be honest, probably tasted the same smothered in gravy. Has this happened before? I asked. His silence told me everything. But then he spoke, quiet as a confession. Sometimes when I mess up. Last month, he made me sleep in the garage all night for forgetting to take out the trash. Once he locked me in the basement for 2 days because I broke one of his beer bottles. Beer bottles. Of course. Can't waste the sacred nectar. Priorities. Every word felt like being punched in the gut. My grandson's smart kind wouldn't hurt a fly. Had learned to shrink himself down just to survive. Your mother knows about this? I asked, my voice dangerously sharp. She says Wilbur's just trying to teach me discipline. That I need to be more responsible. His voice cracked. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am just. Don't. I spun to face him fully. Don't you dare blame yourself. What that man's doing isn't discipline. It's abuse. And it ends today. Panic flared in his eyes. No, Grandpa. Please. If you make a scene, he'll just take it out on me later. He always does. And there it was. The terror of a boy who's lived under someone else's boot too long. Through the windscreen, the house still glowed like a festive advert. Warm lights, clinking glasses, laughter. Inside, my daughter served up dinner while her stepson froze in my truck, begging not to make things worse. You're 18, I said firmly. You don't have to live like this. And I'm not going to let you. But where would I go? I don't have money. I can't afford uni. You'll come home with me tonight. We'll figure the rest out later. Hope and fear fought across his face. Hope that maybe, finally, someone would save him. Fear that life doesn't actually work out that way. He won't let me leave, Amos whispered. He'll call the police. Say I stole something. Or that you kidnapped me. I looked at the glowing house. Felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Martha, God rest her, would have played diplomat. Smoothed it over. But Martha wasn't here. And diplomacy had left my grandson freezing on the doorstep. Let me worry about Wilbur, I said, climbing out into the snow. My boots crunched. My hands shook, but not from a cold. Rage has a way of warming you from the inside out. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? I asked. Up close, I saw faint bruises along his jawline, hidden in the shadows. I tried, he whispered. But you always talked to Mom, and she. The memory hit me. Last month, Amos phoned while I was cooking. His voice small. Grandpa, Wilbur says I can't eat dinner with them anymore. Says I have to earn my way back to the table. I'd laughed it off. Thought it was teenage melodrama. Called Leona the next day, and she brushed it aside. Like she always does. And I'd let her. Not anymore. Dad, you're overreacting, Leona had said once, with that saintly sigh only daughters can master. It's just normal family discipline. Amos exaggerates everything. You know how teenagers are. Ah yes, the teenage condition. Clinically defined as everything you say is a lie unless it makes the adults look good. I'd almost bought it too, until the memories started elbowing their way back. Like that summer phone call. Amos had sounded wrecked. Granddad, Wilbur yelled at me again about leaving dishes in the sink. Made me wash every dish in the house twice. Twice. Because, apparently, once wasn't soul-crushing enough. When I asked Leona about it later, she gave me the martyr routine. He's just being dramatic. Wilbur's trying to teach him responsibility. Right. Because nothing screams responsibility like running a dishwashing boot camp in your own kitchen. Gordon Ramsay would have called it excessive. How long's this been going on? I'd asked, bracing myself. Since Mum married him 3 years ago. 3 bloody years. And me, the clueless grandfather, thinking Amos' sudden fondness for fishing trips meant he liked the lake. Turns out he just liked not being home. Imagine that. And then came the kicker. The basement incident, I said slowly, the puzzle clicking together like some sick jigsaw. You mentioned sleeping in the garage. How many times? More than I want to count, he muttered, staring at his hands as if they were guilty too. Last winter he'd actually slept in my truck, on Christmas Eve, because Wilbur locked him out for forgetting to shovel the driveway. While I was inside, merrily guzzling eggnog and congratulating myself on what a lovely family holiday we were having, the boy was freezing his backside off outside in a Ford. Oh yes, the Father of the Year award was practically engraved with Wilbur's name. Your mother knows about this? I asked, hoping, stupidly, she didn't. Amos nodded miserably. She says Wilbur's just trying to make me a better person. That I need to stop being so sensitive and follow the rules. Sensitive. Because apparently nearly freezing to death on Christmas Eve is just being dramatic. Maybe next year he could spice things up by getting frostbite. That'd really toughen him up. The rage boiled in my chest, hot and steady. Martha used to tell me to count to 10 when I got like this. Well, Martha wasn't here, and frankly, I didn't fancy arithmetic. I stood, still wrapping my coat tighter around Amos. Come on, lad. We're going inside. Grandpa, no. Please, if you make a scene, he'll just what? I snapped. Make you sleep outside in freezing weather? Beat you? Starve you? The boy flinched. And that was it. I was already marching up to the house. The front door loomed, some smug, suburban fortress. Wilbur's pride carved into wood and brass. I didn't bother knocking. My boot connected with the lock. 68 years old. But decades of factory work had left me with legs that could still make an impression. The door splintered open with a crack that echoed round the neighborhood. Lovely. Consider it a public service announcement. Inside was, well, something straight out of a lifestyle magazine. Candles, crystal glasses. Turkey so golden it could have been in a food ad. The whole scene paused mid-bite, Wilbur at the head of the table, carving knife in hand. Leona dolled up in a green dress I'd never seen before, and a 10-year-old girl frozen with mashed potatoes halfway to her mouth. It was all very Norman Rockwell, if you ignored the part where they'd left a child to turn into a human icicle outside. Have you completely lost your minds? My voice bounced off the walls, and the little one dropped her fork. Gravy splattered across the pristine white tablecloth like a Jackson Pollock. Beautiful. Dad. Leona squeaked. What are you? How did you? While you're in here feasting like royalty, that boy was freezing outside. I pointed at Amos, still shivering in my coat. 4 hours, Leona. 4 bloody hours. Wilbur set his knife down with the theatrics of a man about to duel. He stood, bigger than I remembered, chest puffed up like an overfed rooster. Who gave you permission to enter my house? Ah, there it was. The alpha male routine. Pathetic, really. This is private property, he added darkly. You're trespassing. Private property? I took a step forward, matching him. You mean the property where you locked my grandson outside to freeze while you stuffed your face with turkey? Behind me, Amos trembled harder. Not just from the cold now, but from the sheer terror of seeing someone finally standing up to Wilbur in his own kingdom. The irony nearly killed me. Holiday music still tinkling in the background about gratitude and family togetherness, while I was seconds away from redecorating Wilbur's dining room with his own smug face. Look at him, Wilbur. Really look? I demanded, finger pointed at Amos. This is what your responsibility lessons look like. Wilbur folded his arms and lifted his chin, the human embodiment of I'm right because I say so. And for the first time in my life, I genuinely hoped the turkey got cold. The boy ruined our holiday, Wilbur announced, like he was delivering some grand political statement instead of explaining why he'd left a teenager to shiver on the doorstep like an unwanted Amazon parcel. He needed to learn a lesson about responsibility and consequences. A lesson? Oh, marvelous. Nearly freezing a child to death over a slightly burnt turkey. Because that's how Gordon Ramsay runs Hell's Kitchen, isn't it? Forget the shouting. He just locks people outside in sub-zero weather until they achieve enlightenment. He's 18, not a child. And this is my house. My rules, Wilbur continued, voice full of that smug tone men get when they think they're being logical. I swear, if I'd had £1 for every time I'd heard my house, my rules, I could have bought Buckingham Palace by now. I'm trying to teach him discipline, he added, like he was delivering wisdom straight from Mount Olympus. Something his mother obviously failed to do in his first 17 years. Leona flinched, but didn't say a word. Just sat there in her green dress, looking back and forth like it was Wimbledon. Except the prize here wasn't a silver cup. It was whether her son froze to death. Discipline. I stepped closer, close enough to see the grease stains on Wilbur's plate and the wine on his lips. That's called child abuse. And you're lucky I don't call the police right now. Child abuse. Wilbur actually laughed. Laughed. A cold, smug chuckle that could have chilled wine. He ruined a $20 turkey. I sent him outside to think. That's not abuse, that's parenting. For 4 hours. In 5-degree weather. But apparently that was just firm guidance. Honestly, the way he waved his hand dismissively. As if hypothermia was just character building. Look at him, Wilbur said. He's fine. A little cold never hurt anyone. Fine. Yes, because nothing screams fine like lips turning blue and a body shaking hard enough to rattle cutlery. Dad, please, Leona piped up at last, her voice trembling. Don't ruin our holiday. We can discuss this later as a family. I turned on her, utterly gobsmacked. Ruin your holiday? Your son was outside freezing while you were in here eating turkey. And you're worried about me ruining the evening? Sorry, love, I didn't realize attempted manslaughter was part of the Christmas festivities. She looked down at her plate, because mashed potatoes were apparently easier to look at than the truth. When you were 18, I said, and you dented my truck, did I lock you out in a blizzard? When you failed your maths test, did I make you sleep in the garage? That's different, she whispered. How? I asked. Because apparently, I'd missed the chapter in Parenting for Psychopaths that explained this subtle distinction. That's when Wilbur stepped between us, face red, chest puffed like a prized turkey about to explode. Because this is my house. And Amos is not my biological son. I have every right to discipline him as I see fit. And there it was. The truth slithered out, ugly and obvious. Amos wasn't blood, so Amos didn't matter. Just an inconvenience. Something to control, punish, and discard. You have 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson, I said, voice like ice. Wilbur laughed again. Honestly, if smugness were currency, he'd have been a billionaire. I don't owe that boy anything. If he doesn't like my rules, he can live somewhere else. The little girl cried harder. Leona hushed her, but her eyes never left mine. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the wine on Wilbur's breath, cheap and overpoured. You're right about that, I said. He is going somewhere else to live. I pulled out my phone, slow and deliberate. My thumb hovered over the keypad. And suddenly Mr. Big Man looked a touch less invincible. Either you apologize right now, or I call Child Protective Services, and let them know you left an 18-year-old outside in 5-degree weather for 4 hours. I'm sure they'll call it parenting too. Try me. You wouldn't dare, Wilbur sneered, trying to loom. I've faced bigger blokes than him. Spoiler, they lost. I started dialing. Behind me, Amos clutched my arm, trembling, not from a cold now, but from that special kind of fear you get when standing up only ever makes things worse. Dad, please, Leona said again, stepping between us like a peacekeeper at a bar fight. Don't destroy our family over this. I'm not destroying anything, I said, eyes never leaving Wilbur. He did that the moment he decided to abuse my grandson. Abuse. Wilbur spat. I was teaching him responsibility, something his weak mother never managed. Leona flinched like he'd slapped her, but still said nothing. Silence, her favorite hobby. Get out of my house, old man, Wilbur barked. You've no authority here. Amos is my responsibility now. Your responsibility? I glanced around the perfect dining room, the polished crystal, the holiday centerpiece, the empty chairs where guests had clearly been sitting while Amos froze outside. Guests who'd apparently found the whole thing normal. Not one of them had said a word. Truly, a room full of saints. Adult consequences, Wilbur blustered, straightening his shoulders. That's what happens in my house. Adult consequences? I echoed. For forgetting to turn off a timer? For being careless with a $20 turkey? For embarrassing you in front of your friends who didn't so much as blink while a boy froze outside? Behind me, Amos whispered, Grandpa, let's just go. Please. I don't want to cause more problems. The defeat in his voice sliced me open. He thought he was the problem. Not the abuse. Not the cruelty. Just him. You're not the problem, son, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You never were. I turned back to Wilbur. You've got 30 seconds to apologize for what you did today. I'm not apologizing for anything, he snapped, arms crossed, chin up. The picture of arrogance. Then we're done. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Amos, go get your things. You're coming home with me. The silence was so thick you could have carved it with Wilbur's bloody turkey knife. Even the little girl stopped crying. You can't just take him, Leona whispered. Watch me, I said, hand firm on Amos's shoulder as I guided him toward the stairs. Go pack, I told him. We're leaving. And for once, I didn't care whose holiday I ruined. Leona followed us, voice going shrill like a kettle about to blow. You can't just walk into our house and take my son. Oh, can't I? News to me. Because here I was, walking. With her son. And not even breaking a sweat. I can, and I am. I shot back, still moving. Amos stayed tucked just behind me like I was his human riot shield. Which frankly I was. Unless you prefer I call the authorities and let them sort it out? That shut her up for a moment. Nothing like the idea of police nosing around your perfect little nightmare home to make you reconsider your tone. Amos scurried up the narrow staircase, footsteps quick, nervous. Behind us, Wilbur thundered like an overweight bouncer who'd just spotted a queue jumper. His heavy boots shook the hardwood. I didn't even bother turning around. Why ruin the moment? This is kidnapping. Wilbur bellowed. I'll have you arrested. Good luck explaining to the police why my grandson was sitting outside in 5 degrees for 4 hours, I replied, still climbing. Oh yes, officer, I was just teaching the boy resilience through frostbite. That'll go down a treat. At the top, Amos darted down the hall and into a box masquerading as a bedroom. It had all the warmth of a storage cupboard, and honestly, I've seen broom closets with more charm. Twin bed, sad little dresser, no heating vent in sight. The single window was letting in enough Arctic air to chill a pint. This is where you sleep? I asked, eyes scanning the bare walls like I'd stumbled into solitary confinement. Amos nodded, already yanking clothes from drawers and stuffing them into a duffel. Efficient, like he'd been rehearsing this jailbreak in his head. Wilbur says the basement's for guests and the other upstairs room is for my sister, he muttered. Not our sister. Just my sister. Even in his own home, the lad had been demoted to occasional lodger. Lovely. Take what matters, I said, planting myself in the doorway like a guard dog. We're not coming back for anything. Leona appeared, mascara streaks and tears everywhere, playing her part in this tragic little soap opera. Amos, think about what you're doing. This is your home. Your family. Some family, Amos muttered, stuffing in a sweatshirt like he was packing proof of sanity. Real families don't lock each other outside to freeze. Wilbur was just trying to teach you responsibility, she insisted. Oh yes, because hypothermia is character building. Why bother with lectures when you can go full Arctic survival training? Amos looked up at her, and in his eyes you could see it. 3 years of bottled up hurt and disappointment all queuing up for their big exit. Last week, he said quietly, he made me sleep in the garage. Because I left a glass in the sink. A glass. Imagine being sentenced to solitary because you forgot to load the dishwasher. That's not normal, I said deadpan. Leona's face crumpled. He has high standards. High standards? He's not Michelin. He's just a prat with control issues. He wants me gone, Amos said, zipping the duffel. And you know it. Downstairs, Wilbur was waiting like some cheap nightclub bouncer. You leave my house, boy, and you don't come back. Fine by me, Amos shot back, voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. Kid had found his backbone, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little proud. The front door was still hanging open from when I'd kicked it in. Cold air streamed through, rattling the tinsel and plastic reindeer like they were staging their own protest. Outside, my truck sat waiting, engine humming, exhaust fogging the night like a signal flare. Amos. Leona cried, wobbling on the edge of melodrama. Please don't do this. I love you. He stopped, turned back once. His voice was quiet, but it cut sharper than anything Wilbur had ever said. If you loved me, Mum, you wouldn't have let this happen. And that as they say, was that. We walked out, silent except for the crunch of boots on frosted ground. I tossed his bag into the back of the truck, opened the passenger door. Inside it was warm, my heater working like the unsung hero it was. "You ready?" I asked, settling into the driver's seat. "I've been ready for 3 years," Amos said, tugging my coat tighter. I backed us out, rolled past the other houses, where normal families were probably finishing their Thanksgiving leftovers instead of starring in a domestic horror show. Radio still playing classic rock. Heater blasting like it had something to prove. And Amos, for the first time all day, looked like he could actually breathe. "Thank you, Grandpa," he said, barely above a whisper. "I can't believe you came for me." "I should have come sooner," I admitted, my voice low. "Should have seen what was happening." "I tried to tell you," he said, "but I didn't know how." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. More comfortable. Like a decent quilt on a cold night. Martha's quilt, in fact. The one she always wrapped around us when the world felt too much. "Tell me about college," I said as we merged onto I-75 North. "What are you studying?" "Mechanical engineering," he replied, his voice growing stronger. "Like you used to do at the factory. Like grandfather, like grandson." If Martha had been here, she'd have been glowing with pride. We'd sort the tuition. Somehow. "You're not a burden, son," I told him. "You're family. And family takes care of each other." Unlike certain people we'd just left behind. By the time we reached my driveway, porch light glowing like a beacon, I swear the house looked warmer, fuller, more alive than it had in years. "Home sweet home," I said, carrying his bag inside. The place smelled of coffee and Martha's lavender sachets, her little rebellion against life's chaos. Guest room was waiting, quilt folded neatly, photos on the wall reminding him he'd always belonged here. And in that moment, I knew the boy was home. Properly home. Not in some drafty storage room. Not under Wilbur's dictatorship. Then it got bigger. How much bigger? Oh, just your standard full-scale dictatorship. He controls everything. When I eat, what I eat. When I can shower. When I can use the phone. You know, the usual amenities of living in a free country. Stripped down to the prison handbook version. Amos' voice shrank as he went on. He made Mum choose between him and me. And she chose him. I had to put the chicken seasoning down before I crushed the pepper grinder in my hand. "Sorry, what do you mean she chose him?" Amos' face tightened. "Last Christmas. Remember how I didn't say much at dinner? That's because Wilbur said I wasn't allowed to speak unless someone asked me a direct question. Mum didn't stop him. And suddenly, last Christmas hit me like a bad sitcom rerun. I thought he was just being a sulky teenager. I'd even joked with Martha later that kids these days didn't know how to make conversation. Brilliant. Turns out he wasn't sulking. He was on enforced monastic silence. "Why doesn't your mother stand up to him?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be grim. "She's scared," Amos said flatly, chopping carrots like he was training for the Great British Vegetable Massacre. "She told me if she leaves him, she'll lose the house and have to move back to the flats. She can't afford us on her own." Of course. Nothing says maternal devotion like sacrificing your kids' well-being for a mortgage. I shoved the chicken into the oven and lit a fire in the fireplace. Folding newspaper and stacking kindling, the closest thing I had to therapy. "Come on. Sit. Tell me something good. School, mates, anything." For the first time all day, the boy actually smiled. "I made Dean's List last semester, and my mate Jake's teaching me guitar." I pointed to a photo on the mantel. Martha, at 20, laughing, guitar in hand, looking like she hadn't a clue the rest of life was waiting to wreck her patience. She always said music was the language of the soul. Amos studied the photo, eyes soft. "I miss her." "Me too, son. Me too." And just like that, the house wasn't dead anymore. The place breathed again, conversation, laughter, the ghost of Martha humming in the background. Dinner was simple, roasted chicken, vegetables, and frozen pie masquerading as dessert. Michelin wouldn't approve, but we weren't aiming for stars. Across the table, I really looked at Amos. The fear was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years. Hope. The most fragile, Ridiculous thing. And yet it looked bloody good on him. We'll ring the college tomorrow, I said, sawing into my chicken. Check your financial aid. Maybe look at a part-time job. Grandpa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I cut in, fixing him with the kind of stare that brooks no argument. That's what family's for. Real family. Not the decorative kind. We were just finishing pie when the phone rang. The sound sliced the air like a guillotine, and Amos nearly dropped his mug. Caller ID, Leona. Naturally. Because peace never lasts more than 5 bloody minutes in this house. And then, bang, bang, bang. Someone tried to take my front door off its hinges. Not neighborly tapping. Not the apologetic knock of someone selling double glazing. No, this was the aggressive thud of people who thought the world revolved around them. Grandpa, Amos started, his voice trembling. Stay behind me, I said, already moving. Second round of pounding, louder this time, plus voices outside. Fabulous. Just what my blood pressure needed. I flicked on the porch light, peered through the peephole, and there they were. 2 uniformed officers, flanked by Wilbur and Leona, both looking like predators on a David Attenborough special. Mr. Burke, one officer called. Police. We need to speak with you. Deep breath. Door open. My body angled to block Amos from view. What can I do for you officers? Wilbur pounced, finger out like he was auditioning for Accusations, the musical. He kidnapped my stepson, broke into our house like a common criminal. The lead officer held up a hand, looking bone-weary, as if family feuds were the only calls he ever got these days. Sir, we need to sort this out. Mr. Burke, is there a young man named Amos Green here? Yes, I said simply. My grandson is here. Wilbur exploded. He kidnapped him, smashed down our door, and dragged him away. Is the young man here voluntarily? The second officer asked, notepad ready. Before I could answer, Amos appeared at my side, blanket wrapped around him like he was auditioning for Les Miserables. His voice shook but carried. I want to stay with my grandpa. Wilbur went crimson, like a kettle seconds before boiling. He's filling the boy's head with lies, turning him against his family. What lies? I snapped. That you left him outside in 5-degree weather for 4 hours? That you've been grinding him down for 3 years? Those lies. Abuse. Wilbur actually laughed, though it sounded more like choking. I was teaching him responsibility. The boy ruined Thanksgiving dinner. Ah yes, the sacred turkey. Nothing justifies cruelty like overcooked poultry. The first officer looked between us with the weariness of a man who probably wished he'd joined the fire brigade instead. Mr. Burke, let's take this inside. We need everyone's account. So in they all came. Wilbur puffed up like a peacock, Leona trailing behind, eyes glued to the floor. She looked smaller, like a woman who finally realized the price tag on the choices she'd made. Spoiler, it was her son. The officer flipped open his notebook. Right then. Mr. Green, you claim this man kidnapped your stepson. Absolutely, Wilbur said smoothly, switching into his reasonable authority figure voice. I knew that tone. I'd used it once myself when explaining to Martha why I'd bought a second-hand motorbike. I came home to find the door broken, Amos gone. Neighbors said an older man forced him into a truck. Forcing. I couldn't stop the laugh. Officer, I rescued him from child abuse. That's what he keeps saying, Wilbur sighed, like butter wouldn't melt. But truth is, he's never liked me. This is just him stirring trouble. The officer turned to Amos, who stood close enough to me that I could feel his shaking. Son, did this man force you to come with him? Amos swallowed, then whispered. No, sir. He saved me. Saved you from what? Amos darted a glance at Wilbur, then back at the officer. From freezing to death on the porch. The second officer's pen hovered. Explain that. I burned the turkey. Wilbur made me sit outside to think about it. For over 4 hours. In 5-degree weather. He's exaggerating. Wilbur jumped in. It was an hour maybe. And he was dressed warmly. I barked a laugh. An hour? Officer, I've got witnesses. When I arrived at 3:15, he'd been out there since 11. In jeans and a t-shirt. Warmly dressed my arse. The first officer swiveled his gaze back to Wilbur, with all the enthusiasm of a man realizing his shift just got a whole lot longer. Sir, is it true you made the young man sit outside as punishment? Wilbur gave a little shrug. Briefly, yes. But he's making it sound worse than it was. Ah yes, just freezing weather for several hours. Nothing says good parenting, quite like a touch of hypothermia to build character. Honestly, Dickens could have written this man. Wilbur puffed up, clearly convinced he was the misunderstood hero in this pantomime. Look, sometimes teenagers need firm discipline. And by firm discipline, apparently, he means light frostbite. Amos, bless him, found his voice. Mum didn't agree to anything. She just didn't stop you. Ouch. That one landed. Every eye in the room swiveled to Leona, who had been auditioning for the role of Silent Lamp in the corner. She stood there like she was seconds from sprinting, hands locked together like prayer might actually save her now. Ma'am, the officer prompted, with the weary patience of a man who probably should have retired last year. What's your version of events? Leona looked like a woman standing on the edge of a cliff. Jump, stay, or let Wilbur shove her. Spoiler, cliffs are more honest than Wilbur ever was. Mrs. Green, the officer pushed gently. We need to know what really happened today. Wilbur, ever the charming bulldozer, loomed closer. The man could intimidate a coat rack if he wanted. Tell them, honey. Tell them how your father's been poisoning Amos against our family. The officer wasn't having it. Sir, step back. Let your wife speak for herself. Translation. Please stop manspreading your ego across the room. Leona's first attempt at speaking barely registered above a whisper, like a kettle thinking about boiling. But then, miracle of miracles, words came out. Yes, Amos burned the turkey this morning, she admitted, eyes darting everywhere but Wilbur's scowl. And Wilbur was upset. Very upset. Upset. Right. Like Chernobyl was a bit of a technical hiccup. He said Amos needed to learn responsibility by sitting outside in freezing weather. The officer's face didn't move, but I swear his soul muttered, bloody hell. How long was he outside, ma'am? Leona's glance flickered again to Wilbur, whose jaw was clenched so tight you could have cracked a walnut on it. Since around 11. Until my father arrived. Around 3:15. Quick maths. 4 solid hours of character building. She's making it sound worse than it was. Wilbur barked, desperately clinging to his role as Dad of the Year. He could have come in any time if he apologized. And that's when Leona snapped. No, he couldn't. You locked the door. You told me not to let him in, no matter what. Silence. Real, proper silence. The kind where the universe itself leans in like, oh, this is getting good. Wilbur's face did a 3-stage fireworks display. Pale, red, corpse white. Leona, he hissed, voice dripping with menace. What are you doing? She squared her shoulders. I'm telling the truth. For once in 3 years, I'm telling the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, the revolution has entered the chat. The officer leaned forward like a teacher, smelling the faint aroma of cheating. Mrs. Green, has this kind of punishment happened before? Yes. And once she started, she couldn't stop. It all came pouring out. Garage beds. Locked doors. Silence at the dinner table unless granted royal permission to speak. Basically, Wilbur had turned parenthood into a dictatorship. Leona, shut up. Wilbur exploded, mask slipping completely. You'll destroy everything we've built. Oh yes. Because when I think of building something, I definitely picture a house made of fear and emotional trauma. Lovely architecture, that. Leona's fury finally broke free. What have we built except misery? Look at my son. Look at him. And for the first time in years, Amos looked at his mum and didn't see her silent, complicit shadow. He saw someone who actually bloody saw him. The first officer stood and moved towards Wilbur. Sir, I'm going to need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. Wilbur stumbled backwards, spluttering. This is ridiculous. You're arresting me based on the word of a bitter old man and his delusional daughter. Mate, if this were Monopoly, you'd have landed squarely on go to jail, and we'd all be cheering. Based on the physical evidence and corroborated testimonies, the officer said, slapping out the handcuffs like it was Tuesday's routine. Wilbur fought to keep his voice smug. "You'll regret this, Leona. You'll lose everything. The house, the money, everything." She looked him dead in the eye. "I'd rather be nothing than watch you hurt my son." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you slam the door on a tyrant. When the police finally carted him off like last week's rubbish, Leona collapsed into a chair and cried the sort of tears that come with a backlog of 3 years. Amos was beside her instantly. "Mom, it's okay. It's over now." "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I should have protected you. You were strong tonight," I reminded her. And it was true. She'd found her spine, even if it had been buried under Wilbur's nonsense for far too long. And just like that, the house felt alive again. The fire crackled, truth had been spoken, and for once, justice hadn't been too busy drinking tea. "Grandpa, what happens now?" Amos asked, eyes wide with something I hadn't seen in years. "Hope. Now we heal," I said simply. Fast forward 4 months. Sunlight streamed through my kitchen window, like the universe finally remembered we existed. Leona was flipping pancakes like a woman reborn, and Amos sat at the table waving his acceptance letter to Ohio State for the 10th time that week. "Full scholarship," he kept grinning. "They're actually paying me to go to school." "Yes," Leona said dryly. "That's generally how scholarships work." She was stronger now, a job at the library, a divorce settlement, and no Wilbur looming over her like a damp cloud of self-importance. Amos had a proper bedroom, not a dungeon. And Leona? She finally sounded like the woman who'd once raised a boy without fear. "Dad," she said to me one morning, "are you sure you don't mind us staying here? I know you're used to your independence." "Independence is overrated," I told her. "Besides, who else is going to make sure Amos doesn't burn down the kitchen again?" That was one time. Amos protested, and the fire was very small. And for the first time in years, I laughed. Properly laughed. Because the nightmare was over, the truth was out, and somehow, against all odds, we'd survived. Phone rings. Burke residence. Leona, ever the receptionist of fate, picks it up. "Oh, hi, Jake." "Yes, he's here." "Guitar practice at 4? "Sure, I'll tell him." She hangs up and turns to us. "Your friend Jake wants to know if you're still planning to practice for the talent show." "The talent show? Excuse me? Amos, you didn't tell me about any talent show." He grinned, cocky, but in that charming way teenagers think they've invented. "It's nothing big. Jake and I are doing an acoustic set. Classic rock. Stuff you'd know." Of course it's classic rock. Because nothing says rebellion like covering songs older than your grandparents. "I'll be in the front row," I promised. Because that's what supportive grandparents do. They clap loudly for questionable covers of Hotel California. After breakfast, I found Leona in the living room, arranging new family photos on the mantel, like we were auditioning for Functional Family of the Year. Photos of Amos' graduation, the one Wilbur nearly ruined, fishing trips, and even Christmas. Our first real Christmas in years. Amazing what happens when you kick the family dictator out. "Any word from Wilbur?" I asked, though honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. His lawyer called. Anger management's going well, apparently. He lost his supermarket job, though. He's moving back to Cleveland to live with his sister. I nodded. Good. The farther away, the better. Leona shrugged. Sometimes I feel sorry for him. Then I remember what he did to Amos, and, yeah, the sympathy evaporates. That's the spirit. Compassion is nice. But selective compassion? Even better. That afternoon, Amos vanished off to practice, strumming his way into rock history, or at least his school gym. Meanwhile, Leona and I worked in the garden. Martha's vegetable patch, to be precise. Because nothing says new beginnings quite like fighting with weeds. Dad, Leona said, pulling at dandelions with the ferocity of someone exorcising demons. I need to thank you again. If you hadn't come that day. I cut her off. Don't thank me. I just did what any grandfather would do. Which is, of course, a lie. Most grandfathers would have stuck to passive-aggressive muttering at family dinners. But sure, let's pretend I'm the average. No, you weren't, she insisted. You risked everything. You could have been arrested, charged with kidnapping. But I wasn't. I said, tossing another clump of earth. Turns out the truth occasionally gets off its arse and shows up. She smiled faintly. Martha used to say that. Of course she did. She was always the smarter one. My job was mainly carrying the spade and pretending it was teamwork. Evening fell into routine, dinner, TV, domestic peace. Leona with her crossword, Amos with his guitar, me with the newspaper. Sounds boring, doesn't it? But boring is underrated. Boring is safe. Boring is the opposite of Wilbur. Grandpa, Amos said during a commercial break, putting down the guitar with the gravity of a man about to announce world peace. I've been thinking of changing my major. From engineering to what? Social work. Counseling. I want to help kids going through what I went through. Well, that nearly knocked me out of my chair. This young man had every right to become a bitter recluse. Yet here he was, planning to turn his trauma into a career. Meanwhile, I can barely manage to keep the garden alive. That's a fine goal, I said. Your grandmother always said the best way to heal from pain is to help others avoid it. Did she really say that? He asked. She did. Along with 1,000 other bits of wisdom I should have listened to instead of nodding like an idiot. Later, Amos and I stepped outside onto the porch. The stars were out, twinkling in that smug way they do when your life finally isn't falling apart. Ready for fishing season? I asked. Can't wait. Think we'll catch anything bigger than last year? With your luck? Probably a whale. We stood in silence. 2 generations of Burkemen, united not by blood, but by the shared trauma of surviving Wilbur. Honestly, better bonding material than any family game night. Grandpa, Amos said as we headed inside, thank you for coming to get me. Thank you for being worth saving. I didn't cry, obviously. I'm British. But if someone had cut onions nearby, I wouldn't have complained. The house glowed warm as we locked up for the night. 3 people, not perfect, not even close, but finally safe. And if Martha were here, she'd probably roll her eyes, call us dramatic, and then admit she was proud anyway. And honestly, that's enough. So if you liked this story, hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment. Pretend you're part of this dysfunctional little family for 5 seconds. And if you want another tale of chaos and questionable decision-making, click the box on the left. Because trust me, life doesn't make sense. But the stories? Oh, they're worth it.